So let's talk about one of my favorite grammatical constructions in Latin called a gerundive. Now, a gerundive is something that shows obligation. Now, we've had other sentences in Latin that shows obligation. You'll usually see it in sentences like this. We have commonly seen this construction, necesse, est, and then a dative, like in this context. In this sentence, I used mihi, meaning it is necessary for me. But today we're going to use a gerundive to show the same obligation, something that is necessary or required to do. So how do I form it? Well, first of all, we need to go back and think about participles. Let's review participles. So we've had the present active participle, which comes from the second principal part. Take off the RE and add an NS, becoming amans, translating as loving. We've had the perfect passive, which is just your fourth principal part, in all genders, amatus, meaning loved. Now today, we get to talk about specifically your future passive participle. Now, the future passive participle is the same thing as a gerundive, so you can use it interchangeably. So future passive is the same thing as a gerundive. So how do I form it? Well, it's very similar to what we've done before. You go to your second principal part, so we're going to use amare. You're going to take off the RE and add A-M-A. Okay, that's your stem. So I'm going to add this to my little box here. A-M-A. Then you're going to add the letters N-D, as in gerundive. That's how I always remember it. And then you can add your gendered endings. Amandus, Amanda, Amandum. And these will be translated as must, and then whatever the verb means. In this case, it must love. So now that we see how we form it, with seeing this ND letting us know that there's going to be a gerundive, let's see how we translate it in Latin, because it's a little bit different than what we're used to. Here we have two sentences that mean the exact same thing in English. We have one in a normal verb infinitive construction. For example, it is necessary for me to flee. Nothing that complicated. But when we look at it in the sense of this gerundive, it's a little bit different. So when we take a look at this, we can see fugiendum comes from fugere, meaning to flee. We can see that this is a gerundive, but what does that actually mean? And we have mihi over here in the dative. Well, this is called a dative of obligation. Any dative that's going with a gerundive is called a dative of obligation. It's showing something that who must do the action. I misspelled obligation. How would you translate this? Well, our dative of obligation is the one that is doing the action of this. So I would still just translate this as, despite the fact that it's dative, as I. This ND lets us know it's gerundive, so I'm going to just put must to let us know it's gerundive and then translate it. I must flee. That is it. That is how you translate a gerundive. Now, if you're going to ask me, well, what happens to this ask? If you were to translate it literally, it doesn't make sense in English. It would be, to me, it is to be fled, is its literal translation. However, that doesn't make sense in English. That is not grammatically correct. So we just translate it with your dative of obligation being your subject, the gerundive letting you know that it's something that you must do, and then the action. And that's how you translate a gerundive. All right, let's look at this next section. I have this future passive participle, also known as a gerundive, right here. I can tell from this ND letting me know it's a gerundive. And because of that, I'm going to put the word must here to remind me that it's something that has to be done. Now I have this dative right here, this dative of obligation, letting me know who is doing the action. So who is doing this action? Well, we. Now we must ambulare, to walk. So we just say we must walk. That's it. You can completely ignore this S when you're translating it. It's just telling you that it's obligated to walk. So we do one more, just for funsies. Now this sentence seems a lot more likely to Sonia translation. It's more than 3 words long. So let's take a look at what we have here. We have our first clause right here. I'm going to go to my verb, wolunt. This NT is letting me know that my subject is an understood they. So if they, and then vole, wish, videre, to see the emperor, normal clause, then we have this next sentence, this next clause, eis festinandum est. ND letting me know it's a gerundive, translating it as must. My dative of obligation, meaning they, it translates to they must flee. And then I can pretend the S doesn't exist because that sort of this construction doesn't require you to put it into English. So if they wish to see the emperor, they must flee.